Now that you understand the basics of Python, you can use more advanced functions such as for loops and conditionals. These are both known as control statements. Think of them as traffic signs that direct the flow of your code. For example, imagine that you've just created a list with 3 elements, hello, 21, and Python, for example, and you want to show the contents of the list 1 element per line. You could type something like my list, then index 0, index 1, index 2, but that quickly becomes impractical for lists that contain dozens or hundreds of elements. Instead, you can do the same thing by using a for loop, which will assign each element in the list to a variable, which can then be used in another command. For example, we could print each element in the list by typing for x in my list, colon, and then on the next indented line, print x. The first line is the declaration of the for loop, in which each element of the list will be consecutively assigned to the variable x. The body of the for loop is print x, which will return each element on a separate line. The body can contain as much code as you want. You can also combine for loops with the range command, which displays the index of the first element and the number of items in the list. For example, this code returns range O, 3, in which 0 represents the beginning index of the list and 3 is the number of elements. To combine this with the for loop, we can use something called string formatting to describe each element as it is printed. The F indicates to do string formatting, and then in braces we can include any variable we want, and this will then print the value of that variable. It's easiest to practice this on your own and see it in action, for example, if we run this code block right here. You can vary the syntax by using what is called a comprehension, which simply inverts the order of the body and the declaration of the for loop, which gives you a more compact version. Again, this does the same thing as before, it's just for convenience. You can see how for loops can be very useful for fMRI data analysis if all of the subjects are being analyzed the same way, and we will talk about this in future videos. Now let's talk about conditional statements, which, believe it or not, you encounter in everyday life. For example, if you have more than $10, then you can go get the extra guacamole on your burrito at Chipotle. Else, if you have between $8 and $10, just get a regular chicken burrito. Else, buy nothing and go hungry. Although this seems like a silly example, it illustrates the concept of a conditional statement. Certain conditions are evaluated, and if they are met, then one decision is made. If the conditions are not met, then another decision is made. We can represent this in Python using the following code. The first line assigns a value of 8.0 to money, or $8, and then the conditional statement evaluates the variable and executes the appropriate block of code. The first statement checks whether the value of money is greater than 10. If it is, then print get the extra guac. If the value is less than 10, it moves to the next statement represented by elif, short for else if. Lastly, if none of the statements so far are true, then the last part of the code will be executed, represented by else, which captures all other possibilities. Try setting the value of money to different numbers, such as 15 or 5, and run the block of code each time to see what the output will be. Now, conditionals can be nested inside for loops, allowing you to create more sophisticated code that will only execute certain blocks of code within the for loop. For example, let's say that we are running an fMRI experiment and that we have 5 subjects. We note that one of them is an outlier and place that subject in a separate list. When we run the for loop, we skip that outlier subject, using this block of code right here. Note that this line, the if sub $outlier subject, is going to look for whether the current subject, in our subjects list matches the outlier subject. If it does, then we skip the preprocessing and move to the next subject in the list. For loops can also be nested within other for loops. For example, in this block of code, we have 3 different pipelines to do things such as preprocessing, denoising, and QA checks. We will do this for each of the subjects listed in the subjects list. You can see how it goes through each subject individually, and then within that subject runs all 3 pipelines that we have in our pipelines list. To analyze an actual experiment, you would then have another line of code in the body that would execute each pipeline. Having learned control statements, you have more flexibility in how to implement your code. Control statements are ubiquitous in Python, and you will need to understand the fundamentals in order to read other people's scripts as well. The statements can also be combined with self-contained blocks of code called functions, which we turn to now.